Hello, hello. Welcome to Revolving Change Podcast, where we talk about change and how it relates to your career and business. I'm Joanna, one of the junior coaches here.
I'm Isaac, one of the junior coaches here as well.
And I'm Jorge Loebl. I'm or George for many others, the founder of Revolving Change.
In today's podcast, we're going to be talking about expectations. It's such a saucy topic because a lot of conflicts arise from expectations. But before we do dive deep into the interpersonal relationships that occur in relation to expectations, I do believe it's first important to define what expectations actually are, right? So, Jorge, what are expectations for you?
Well, expectations are the foundation of how you run a business and how you manage teams of people. And we're talking strictly business because there is a great overlap in connecting to expectations in private life. Expectations are the fiber that keeps a business going in the right direction, in the same direction, maybe not the right one, but in the same direction. Expectations are the guardrails that ensures that a business stays within these guardrails. It doesn't go all over the place. Like I said, hopefully the right direction, because if the guardrails point in the wrong direction, then we all go in the wrong direction, get to the wrong place. So expectations don't guarantee that you get to the right place, but guarantee that you all get to the same place. Expectations are the way instructions are executed. Very often they're taking as synonymous. Well, you know what I expected. I told you what to do. Well, that was an instruction. The expectation means that you go into the detail how that instruction will be executed, what the starting point is, what the end point is, what the steps in between are. The measurability, those that know revolving change know that unless you can measure it, you cannot control it, and we are passionate about measuring everything we do and everything our clients do. So expectations and instructions are connected, not the same, and depend on each other.
It's interesting you say that, because my understanding, or at least what expectations have been for the longest time, is a firm belief about a certain result, like a result that you're looking for, or a certain action that you're looking for. That's what expectations are for me. And sometimes because I've experienced it as well in the past, where I would delegate something to someone and the results aren't what I was expecting, for the lack of a better word, expecting them to be. So
why not?
Probably because my first and initial reaction would be, did I communicate my expectations well? And I believe that's one of the biggest things that revolves around expectations, is communicating your expectations to the other person and making sure that the other person actually understood that expectations and you both are on the same page.
Everything you said, I think is correct, but what you said doesn't fit, and what you said will not foot the bill of having proper managed solid expectations. First of all, we are using interchangeably the concept of instruction and expectation, and they're not. You gave somebody an assignment and you expect, and you get a different outcome than you expected. An assignment is an instruction. Do X. Now the question is, how complete is that instruction? Does it contain all the information it needs? Does it explain all the tools that need to be used? Does it explain the time frame, the cost, the duration, the effort? Depending on the business and depending on the instruction, it can be huge, right? You could say run production. It's a very simple instruction, but run production means probably a catalog, a manual of 700 pages, depending on the industry you're in. The fact that you give good instructions, let's assume that you did give complete, detailed, all-encompassing instructions, and you get an outcome different than what you were expecting. Did you get a commitment on every point of your instruction that the person receiving the instruction was going to fulfill it?
Not necessarily. It's more of like, well, in my case, when I do give instructions for certain tasks, it's more outcome based. I'm not so anal about how they do it, as long as the outcome is what I expect it to be, in a way, because I do believe that you can achieve the same result through different means. So, and sometimes how someone does something is totally different from how I do it.
Sometimes, but there is, you want to boil an egg, you need an egg and you need water and you need fire, right? You know any other way of boiling an egg?
No.
Right. So for some things in life, there is, certain steps. You need to first have the chicken, then you need to have the egg. You also need the chicken, right? You need to have the egg, then you need to have a pot, then you need to have water, and you need to put the egg in the water, and you need to have fire. Mm-hmm. And ideally, you want to know how long you want to cook it. But if you cook it 50 minutes, it's going to be hard-boiled anyway.
For sure.
The answer to my question is a question which has a binary answer, yes or no. You did not answer my question.
Mm-hmm.
So I'm going to go back and ask the question again. Did the person you gave instructions to understand? Agree to what it needed to be done the way it needed to be done?
Let me contextualize that. Because as far as the instructions I gave, which did not include the steps that they need to take, so that was excluded in my instructions. So as per the instructions that I gave, the person agreed, which did not include specific steps of how to do something.
So the person agreed to the outcome that you wanted and the timeline that you wanted.
Correct.
Okay.
That's
good. So the answer to my question is yes.
Yes.
So the outcome was not what you wanted at the end. It did not fulfill your expectations. Now, what was it? Was it a timeline?
It was more of like the result of the project.
So if you had to redo it today,
mm-hmm.
and you had to ensure that that outcome was in line with what you were expecting, what would you do different?
First, I would, because this already happened. So what
of course, we're learning from experience. I hope we do. Yes. So what would you have done different?
What would have I done different? I would have first reached an understanding towards the terms that we were both using in relation to the outcome that we were both talking about. My definition of red was not their definition of red. Just take, for example. So that would be the first thing that I should have done, was really make sure that we're on the same page with the terminologies that we were talking about. Because the person was nodding. Yeah. And then I was like, what is this? When they gave me the result. So that would be the first thing that I would have done.
What else would you have done?
Check in the middle and not just wait for the result.
So now you're talking about the process.
That's also true. But yes, in terms of understanding, that would be it. Redefine terminology.
Okay. But in terms of understanding, it's part of the process, because I think what you're telling me, what I understand you're saying, is that you have a set of standards and tools you use, which is a red has a number. And you don't agree on the number. You did not instruct the number of red to be used.
Yes.
So your instructions were incomplete.
Yes.
So there, when you start telling the person the red number they need to use, you start already telling them the steps they need to take. You need to use this particular tool. You're getting into the process, whether you like it or not.
So what you're saying.
So the statement you made earlier that here's where the starting point, I want the ending point, and which way you get from A to B, obviously doesn't work, because you should have told them that there is a step in between that they need to take into account, which is use color, whatever the color number is. And like that, there might be other steps that should have been instructed for the person to understand and agree. Okay, I understand. Yes, I need to use that color number. I need to use maybe that template. I need to store maybe the file in this particular place. I need to use this particular format. And all of a sudden, when you start thinking about it, you start realizing that it's not just, I don't care about the steps are. Maybe you have to care about what the steps are. Because maybe in between the steps, and this is where often expectations go wrong, there is something you assume. You know what happens when people assume? You know how to spell assume? Most people do, right?
Yeah.
A-S-S-U-M-E. We make an ass out of you and me. When people assume, then the other person assumed differently, and then the problem happens and the hits the fan. I understand the desire to have a starting and ending point and throwing over the wall and expect the outcome that you want. But if you're serious about managing expectations and not just giving instructions, then the process is more complicated, is more detailed, is more demanding, but the outcome is likely to be much better. And when the outcome is not as good as you want it to be, you have a basis to go back and analyze what went wrong where with the other party or parties that were part of the process, and have an agreement where we went wrong that it will not repeat itself. When we throw over the wall, which is what many managers and leaders do, the lands somewhere on the other side. Maybe you grab it, maybe you don't, maybe you wind up under it and you get spilled on it. The bottom line is you have no follow-up in the system. You're hoping that it's not going to you get at the end of the process, and when you get to the end and you go like, oh, this is not what I wanted. Well, that's what I understood you wanted.
So what you're saying is when you're managing expectations and communicating expectations, you have to be as specific as possible?
You have to be very specific, as specific as possible indeed. But it has to be a clearly outspoken agreement between the two parties, the one giving the assignment, the one receiving the assignment, the one setting the expectation, and the one needs to commit to fulfill the expectation. And that is where the weak spot is. This step is mostly, grossly, brutally ignored. I told you what to do. You've done it before. You know what needs to be done. That is an instruction. It's not an expectation. An expectation would be, we've done this just before, you've done it great, we're using the same guidelines we used at the time. Are you still in the picture? Do you remember what the guidelines are? Yes. Do you know where to find the tools that you need? Yes. Okay. Do you understand the timeline is X, that we need this by then? Yes. Do you understand also the standard of quality of what we need delivered is, whatever the standard is, documented in a procedure? Okay. Do you have any questions as of, how we need this assignment completed? Are my expectations of you and your performance clear to you? I'm using a vocabulary which, of course, we will not use on a day-to-day. I'm just elaborating on it to make sure I make my point, okay? That's not the way you would speak with somebody on a day-to-day running a business. But is my expectation clear, and are you willing to fulfill my expectation in the time frame and conditions that I set? And the answer should be, yes, I am committing to do what you asked me to do, as you asked me to do. Then I have a clear set expectation. Until then, I don't. I have an instruction, and I have the hope that it will not be and it will be what I want it to be.
Would you say then, though, that the level at which you set expectations with a person varies from person to person, as well as the tenure of the person that you're talking to?
Not necessarily, no. I wouldn't say that. I think that it's making an assumption when you say that because this person is more senior and more experienced, didn't have a bad day, did sleep the night, is rested, his wife is not just throwing him out of the house, and his car did not break down, and his bank is foreclosing on their house, and none of that is happening because you just don't know. There's lots of assumptions we're making. No, I think, yes, we need to go through that process repeatedly. Which is why companies have procedures, written procedures, and written process descriptions. That is the foundation of an expectation, but you need to then go through them, make sure that people are trained on using those procedures and those process descriptions, and that they commit to respect and adhere to them. And then you need to do what you said you didn't do, which is follow up throughout the process to make sure we are adhering and doing as the procedure describes in the timeline that was agreed that we're going to do it, so at the end we don't have and we have what we The procedure describes is the outcome, and the process describes is the outcome of that task. When we don't have those procedures, which we often don't, in our business we have very few because we are very creative and we have to respond to the spur of the moment. We need to respond to the prevailing, pivoting, never-ending, changing conditions. We still need to go through, and we do with our clients, have a clear agreement what the expectation is that we have of their involvement and their participation. And I want to hear my client telling me what is they expect from us and from me. Because I need to be sure that as I make progress in our work, I can go back to my client and ask him, am I still meeting your expectations? Am I still fulfilling what we agreed I was going to do the way I was going to do it? Because if you're going to do a task that takes X amount of time, let's say let's leave the examples out and let's keep it dry. We have a task that takes 5 days, and I'm only going to check with you on day 4, and we went wrong, and think of the switches of a train. We went wrong on day 1, and while instead of pointing in that direction, it was pointing just 1 millimeter away. That millimeter, 5 days away, it's a mile. I cannot recover that mile on day 4 for day 5, so I missed my goal. I will not fulfill the expectation. So recurring, ongoing, short follow-ups and verification of the progress, and verification that our expectations are being understood and fulfilled, and vice versa, are fundamental.
So the way that that person is saying is that's from a manager's perspective, right? It's your responsibility to make sure that those under your care are in agreement to the expectations that you both parties have set, correct? But what if you're the...
It's more than that. It's more than that. No, it's not correct. It's incomplete. It's correct, but it's incomplete.
Okay, please elaborate on that.
Yes. First of all, the first expectation that I have that I will agree with you is that if you feel that the expectation I'm setting cannot be fulfilled, you will get back to me immediately. So that's the first expectation about expectations. So that sets a foundation, a layer on the foundation that gives me a certain, no guarantee, there is no guarantees, we're humans, perfectly imperfect, but a reassurance that you understand that if I have an expectation, you feel uncomfortable or you feel unsure, you're going to ring the bell, you're going to raise the flag, and you're going to stop stuff, say, hey, we need to talk. I'm not sure if I really understood what you want me to do or how you want me to do where you want me to go. That's number one. Number two, part of the expectation process is making sure that the person agreeing to the expectation understands that it's their job, their responsibility to raise that flag if there is insecurity. If there is any doubt, any iota of doubt, they need to raise that question. And that is the recipient's responsibility. Even if it's a subordinate, it is my job to give an assignment, give the expectations. And there's one thing we didn't talk about, which I think is extremely important, is the predictable consequence. There have to be predictable consequences for expectations fulfilled or non-fulfilled. You have a bonus, you have a target to meet, but there will be consequences when we meet it, and there's consequences when we miss it. So when we miss it, then hits the fan, and there will be consequences for me, for you, for the team, maybe for the company, maybe for our clients. And all that is part of the equation. So the responsibility is also from the recipient to raise a flag when things are not working out as they should. Maybe the follow-up, I just did it, things were okay, and 10 minutes later, things go astray. As the recipient of the expectation that I have to fulfill, I should not wait until you come back tomorrow to check on me. I should raise a flag immediately and say, hey, we talked 5 minutes ago, it was okay, but now it's not okay, this happened. Did I answer your question?
Yes, it does. But now it actually raises another question though, because it's more of a cultural company culture kind of thing. Usually if you're the subordinate or you're someone who's just following orders, it can sometimes come across to raise the flag yourself. Because then I'm going to talk on a different topic. It could come across as you don't know what you're doing. You know, like fears that are fears that are getting out of control that feed into your insecurity sometimes hinders you from raising the flag. How then
Absolutely.
is someone in that position able to overcome that?
Well, you raise the key word, which is culture. If you don't have the company culture that will encourage people to raise the flag and I'm thinking of one of the books I have right there, one of my favorite books in Moments of Truth from Jan Carlson. Jan Carlson is saying moments of truth is you invert the pyramid. So imagine the pyramid of hierarchy. Here is the CEO and here are all the people. Then you invert it. And the people on top are the ones which are in charge because they're the ones that are in contact with the customer. So if you have that kind of culture, people will have no hesitation whatsoever to raise the flag and, stop it. If we don't create a climate in which you are encouraged to raise the flag and stop us of making mistakes, then the problem is not you, the problem is the culture. So I'm going to give you a simple example of, I will not mention names. In business coaching, we had an office which was a complete floor. So the elevator came right into our office and there was a welcome sign. I mean, at the time it was acrylic. Those were the days, okay? I mean, I was a team manager. I knew where the on and off button of the computers were. So that's how far back we go. Remember, I'm a dinosaur. And it said, welcome to our office or world headquarters. And it was in several languages. And in one language, there was a mistake that I didn't know because my proficiency in that language was not as advanced as it is today.
Mm-hmm.
And at one point in time, somebody mentioned that to me. And then we were in a meeting with senior management and the members of the board. And I mentioned that, yeah, by the way, we have a mistake. We need to change that. And one of the board members said, oh, yeah, I knew that.
Oh.
I blew my stock. I mean, I blew off the handle immediately. I mean, like, I lost my marbles. I said, you knew that? And you said nothing? I mean, you've been walking into this office, seeing it every day and saying nothing for a year? I mean, are you effing kidding me? So to say that culture is the key. And here we failed because we have the culture. The person even felt happy to say, oh, I knew about that, but that didn't raise the flag. And that's where, answering your question, it's culture.
Yes, exactly. But no, but
Are you complaining?
The point was taken very much so.
I hope I hammered it in enough. Yes.
But that's kind of the challenge now, though. Like, if you're that person who needs to raise a flag in a culture that doesn't encourage that or has not cultivated that culture,
you have a problem.
That's a really hard climb. You're going to be like,
I would say if you're good, you should apply with Revolving Change as a coach, as a junior coach. Leave that company. Okay. And then with you, maybe we go and talk to the CEO and do a project with them and help them change the culture.
That's actually so
you remember, the fish always stinks from the head. The problem in a company begins at the top, not at the bottom.
Dang.
If there's a problem at Revolving Change, the buck stops with me and nobody else.
Wow. Okay. That was we now touched on the topic of culture and how that affects companies. But I do think that we have further to discuss about communicating expectations, which would take a whole lot of another time for us to discuss that.
Not only that, we need to talk about not only how we communicate, is how we set them, how we communicate them, how we follow up on them, how we get feedback on them. Mm-hmm. How the expectations fit into the culture, how the culture supports expectations, because I mentioned culture, and culture in itself is, I mean, you have it or you don't, and if the company doesn't have it, it doesn't matter how good you are at setting them, it's not going to work.
Sure.
If you're going to plant a beautiful flower in the middle of the Sahara, it's not going to blossom, okay? No chance.
That's going to die.
So you need to have the proper ground where you're going to put the seeds for it to blossom, to grow and blossom. Mm-hmm. So yes, we have, I think, a myriad of topics to go on expectations for sure.
For sure. That's going to be something the listeners and the watchers on YouTube are going to be looking forward to. But for today, what is one key topic or thing that you took away from our discussion today?
I would like to start, and I would say that your link to culture was very important because it's one thing that I personally often overlook. I take for granted that when a client reaches out, most of the time they already have the culture because the fact they have the culture motivates them to reach out and work with us. So I often forget myself to focus on culture because the culture, even though it's open enough that they will work with us, often it lacks some of the shining, some of the layers that culture needs for people to feel involved, to feel open, to feel the freedom of raising concerns without feeling that they're going to be accused of not knowing their job, of being incompetent, of so culture to me was a very good point you raised, which I think I appreciate. We need to focus more in the future.
Well, for me, just going to go ahead and go next. It was more of the importance of being specific and communicating something, because I always had the belief that depends on who I'm talking to. If they're more senior, if they're more experienced, the lesser I need to communicate, the lesser I need to explain my expectations. Also, on the subject of avoiding micromanaging, I always take a step back. I like check in mid-project. I don't check in quarter of the project way in. I check in mid-project. But you did raise a really good point wherein that one day they could have ran a mile and it's hard to recover that mile. So constant, frequent check-in.
You need a system. The system needs to tell you for each task and each project what is the ideal frequency of follow-up, and that will change from task to task and project to project. But having decided that up front is part of your system.
Exactly.
Sorry.
No, actually it's pretty good. Leslie, Isaac?
Sure. I think it was a very nice reminder to hear that you have to get a confirmation that the expectation you're setting has been agreed upon by the party that has to execute them. Because even in the example, it sounds awkward, but it is, if you're not used to saying it, it's awkward to ask, do you understand that we're going to be doing this? Is this okay with you that this is the set agreement? Like it's like maybe you'll feel like you're talking to a kid, but to some extent, I need that when someone gives expectations to me. I know that. So then how much more so the people around me that I have to give expectations to as well? It was a nice reminder that actually it's okay to say things that feel awkward because that's necessary. Kind of time back into
Well,
change.
it won't feel, allow me to come in because it will not feel awkward if you have set the expectation about how you set expectations. If you have explained and agreed beforehand that every time we give an assignment, we discuss the details of the expectation. It may sound childish, it may sound condescending to the point that we're gonna, when you go to the toilet, you first need to put your pants down before you, okay, then we go through the different steps.
Right.
So agree with it beforehand, how you set expectations. I think that is...
So you set expectations of how to set expectations.
Absolutely, 100%, 100%. Then it will not feel awkward. It becomes part of the culture. We're back into culture, right? It becomes part of the culture.
Company process and culture, yeah.
Wow.
It becomes normal. It's the way we do business. Also because there's another point before you go, that if we don't do that, we may, which is the Mager model, you overload those that are high performers and you underload those that are bad performers, because those are easy, always saying yes, and are hard workers. You keep loading them with assignments and work and expectations, and those that are less performing are getting away with lower performance, and you're punishing those that perform, and this is going to work against the company, against them, and against you.
Okay. Yeah. Pretty good. Really good last words, Jorge. So
Thank you.
We're gonna actually end it right here. If you have any questions that you'd like to raise regarding this episode, please feel free to contact us at www.revolvingchange.com or any of our socials at revolvingchange.com on LinkedIn.
And if you have additional input and questions to the subject and you want us to cover particular aspects of expectations that apply to you, particularly in terms of your career and your business, raise a question. Maybe you have some input for us that would be very important for us to cover in the next podcast.
That is absolutely true. So until then, we want to say goodbye. Bye.
Bye bye.
Bye. Thank you. Ciao.